Why this dog stared at a stone wall for days left us speechless. The sun was rising over Sycamore Hollow, casting long golden rays through the bare branches of the trees. It was October, and the leaves painted the ground in colors of red, orange, and yellow. A small cabin stood at the edge of the woods, quiet except for the sound of birds chirping and a kettle hissing softly on the stove. Inside, Eli Granger stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window. His silver hair was messy, and his flannel shirt hung loosely on his frame. Ever since he retired from his job as a park ranger, he had struggled to find something to do. He missed the forest, the trails, and the visitors asking for help. Now, the days felt long and slow. He heard a car door slam outside. Eli turned and looked out just in time to see his daughter, June, dragging two large suitcases up the porch steps. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she wore a heavy gray coat that didn't quite hide how tired she looked. "Need a hand?" Eli asked, opening the door. June gave a half smile. "Only if you feel like spraining your back." Eli took one of the suitcases anyway. "You know, you don't have to carry your whole apartment back with you." "Yeah, well," June muttered. "Turns out when your ex gets the house, you pack heavy." They stepped inside. The small cabin smelled like pine and fresh coffee. June glanced around. Not much had changed since she left Sycamore Hollow over 10 years ago. Same stone fireplace. Same mismatched mugs in the kitchen. Same quiet father, too. They sat at the wooden kitchen table. June wrapped her hands around a warm cup of coffee Eli had poured. It felt strange being home again. After her messy divorce and losing her job at the magazine, she had nowhere else to go. She told herself it was temporary, just until she figured things out. Eli cleared his throat. "So, how long are you planning to stay?" "I don't know yet," June replied. "A few weeks, maybe more." Eli nodded but said nothing. The silence between them had always been too loud. Just then, a knock came at the door. Then another, faster this time. "Mr. Granger! Mr. Granger!" a young voice came outside. Eli opened the door to find Tyler Hodge, a boy from down the road, red-faced and breathless. "You gotta come see. There's this dog in the woods sits just standing there. It won't move." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" "Standing there? It's staring at a rock wall, like not moving at all. It's been there since yesterday, my cousin says." June stood behind her father. "A dog?" "Yeah, big one. Looks kind of like a police dog. We called it, whistled, but it didn't even blink. It's weird." Eli grabbed his coat. "Where is it?" "By the old sycamore marker. You know, the stone wall at the edge of the trail." "Come on," Eli said to June. "Let's see what's going on." They followed Tyler up the road and into the woods. Other kids had gathered, their bikes dropped along the trail. They stood in a loose circle, pointing toward a clearing up ahead. "There it is," Tyler whispered. About 20 feet away, a large dog stood frozen, staring directly at a mossy stone wall. It was a Belgian Malinois with tan fur and a black snout. Its body was tense, its ears forward, and its tail still. It didn't bark, growl, or run. It just stared. June reached for her phone. "This is strange. I've never seen a dog do that." Eli took a cautious step forward. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly. The dog didn't move. "I've worked with dogs like this," Eli said, his eyes narrowing. "Search and rescue types. They're trained to lock onto things. But this is different. There's no handler, no gear, and it's not reacting to anything." He knelt down and studied the dog. It looked thin but not starving. Its coat was dirty, and the remains of a collar hung from its neck no tags. "Maybe it's sick," June said, lowering her phone. "Or maybe it's trying to tell us something," Eli murmured. He followed the dog's gaze. The stone wall was old, probably from the 1800s. The rocks were stacked in a jagged line, covered in ivy and moss. One section seemed cleaner than the rest, more disturbed. Eli stepped closer. The dog let out a soft whine but didn't move. "There's something off about this section," he said. "The moss is scraped away." He leaned forward and spotted a small opening between two stones, just a few inches wide. Something about it made the hair on his arm stand up. "June," he said, standing. "Run back and grab my Ranger flashlight. Should be in the garage, and get my med kit too." June didn't ask questions. She took off jogging. The dog gave another soft whine, barely lifting its head. Eli looked at the kids. "Everyone step back, please. This could be dangerous." The dog finally moved just a little. It took a small step toward Eli, then back toward the wall, then sat down again. Watching. Waiting. Minutes later, June returned with a flashlight and a faded green med bag. Eli took the flashlight and crouched low. He shone the beam into the tiny gap. At first, he saw nothing. Thena, flicker, movement. He steadied the beam and felt his breath catch in his throat. Inside the dark space, behind the wall, was a small, dirt-covered hand. "There's someone in there," Eli whispered. June gasped. "What?" "A kid. I think there's a child trapped behind this wall." The dog gave a sharp, urgent bark. Eli stood quickly. "Call 911. Tell them we need search and rescue. Now." June pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "What's going on?" "I think this dog's been standing guard," Eli said, "waiting for someone to find the kid." As sirens began to echo in the distance, the dog finally turned toward Eli, locking eyes with him for the first time. In those dark eyes, Eli didn't see fear or confusion. He saw a plea, a desperate, silent call for help.
The flashing lights of the fire trucks and sheriff's cruiser lit up the woods. Red and blue colors danced across the trees as more people arrived. Firefighters jumped into action. Sheriff Mel Cross stepped out of his truck and headed straight for Eli and June. "Granger," he said, tipping his hat. "What we got?" Eli pointed to the stone wall. "There's a kid trapped behind that section. The dog found him, won't leave his side." Sheriff Cross looked at the dog, who now stood beside the wall again, tense and alert. "That's a smart animal," he said. "Smarter than most people," Eli replied. Fire Captain Dana Rivers knelt by the wall and peered into the small gap with a bright flashlight. Definitely a cavity back there. Might have been an old storage root cellar or a pioneer tunnel. Looks unstable. "We need to get the stones out," Eli said, "but carefully." Captain Rivers nodded. "We'll stabilize the top layers first. If it collapses, the kid might not make it." As the crew got to work, the dog paced in tight circles. It whined and scratched at the dirt, then moved back to the wall, eyes locked on the opening. Eli knelt beside it. "You're doing good, boy. We're helping now." The dog pressed against Eli's leg and let out a soft huff, then turned and stared at the wall again. June was filming everything from a distance. Her hands shook as she held her phone. She didn't care about views or headlines now. Something big was happening, and she wanted to remember every second of it. Within minutes, the firefighters had cleared several stones. The gap was now wide enough for a better look inside. A firefighter shone a beam in and called out, "There's definitely someone in there." Small figure, curled up, breathing shallow. The dog barked sharply, tail wagging for the first time. Sheriff Cross leaned in. "We're going to need an ambulance." One of the paramedics stepped forward, already on the way. June crouched next to her father. "Is he alive?" Eli nodded slowly. "Barely, but that dog saved his life. No doubt about it." The firefighters moved quickly but carefully. The dog barked again and again, as if urging them to hurry. Finally, after what felt like hours, they pulled back one last large stone and reached into the gap. Two hands came out holding a small, limp figure wrapped in an old blanket. The crowd gasped. A paramedic stepped in and checked the child's vitals. Still breathing, weak but stable. June brought her hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. The child was lifted onto a stretcher and rushed to the waiting ambulance. The dog ran beside them, following every move. When the boy's hand dropped limply off the edge of the stretcher, the dog pressed its head against it and let out a low, relieved whine. "Looks like the boy knows the dog," said one of the medics. "He's been guarding him for days," Eli said. "Probably found him and stayed until help came." As the ambulance doors closed, the dog sat down in the dirt, staring at the vehicle. It didn't move, didn't bark, just stared. Eli walked over and gently placed a hand on the dog's back. "Come on, buddy. You're coming with me." The dog didn't resist. It hopped into the back of Eli's truck, curling up on an old blanket June had laid out. Its eyes stayed locked on the ambulance ahead as Eli followed behind. At the hospital, June and Eli sat in the waiting room, the dog lying at their feet. Nurses walked by, casting curious looks. No one objected when June explained the dog's role in the rescue. Not long after, Ruth and Simon Bell, the child's parents, arrived. Their faces were pale and full of fear. "That's our son," Ruth whispered. "That's Luca." She dropped to her knees in front of the dog, tears pouring down her cheeks. "This dog, it found him?" Eli nodded. "He never left the boy's side. That dog's the reason your son is alive." Simon sat beside her, shaking his head in disbelief. "We've been searching for 4 days. Volunteers, helicopters, even dogs. Nobody found anything." Ruth gently stroked the dog's fur. "What's your name, boy?" The dog's ears perked at her voice, but it didn't respond. Then a nurse came into the room. "You can see him now," she said. "He's asking for a dog over and over." They rushed to the room. The dog stood and followed, more alert now. When they entered Luca's hospital room, the boy was sitting up weakly, eyes wide with hope. "Shadow," he whispered. The dog's ears shot up. Its tail wagged. It stepped forward slowly and placed its front paws on the edge of the bed. Luca reached out a small hand and laid it on Shadow's head. The dog licked his wrist gently. "You came back," Luca whispered. Ruth covered her mouth, sobbing. Simon leaned forward. "Do you know this dog, son?" Luca nodded. "He used to live next door. Before they moved, I saw him in the woods. I followed him, then the rocks fell." Eli and June stood near the door. "He must have traveled a long way," June said softly. "He was guarding that wall for days." A nurse overheard and looked surprised. "You mean this dog found the boy and waited for help?" "That's exactly what he did," Eli said. News spread quickly. That night, Sheriff Cross came to visit with an update. "We ran the dog's tag number from an old vet file," he said. "This is Shadow. Belonged to the Winslow family. They moved to Colorado 2 months ago." "Colorado," June said. "That's over 1,800 miles away." "Yep," the sheriff replied. "And get this, the boy and Shadow used to be best buddies. The Winslows said Shadow never adjusted after the move. Dug under fences, escaped more than once, then one day, he was just gone." June stared at the dog, now curled at Luca's side. He found his way back, all this way, to the only kid he ever really bonded with. Ruth touched the dog's head. "He's our miracle." Outside the room, June leaned against the wall and whispered, "Dad, I think we're witnessing something special." Eli nodded. That dog didn't just save a life. He came home. The next day, the story spread fast. Everyone in Sycamore Hollow was talking about the boy who had been saved by a mysterious dog. Local news crews arrived at the hospital. People dropped off flowers and stuffed animals. And everyone wanted to meet the brave dog named Shadow. But Shadow didn't seem to care about the attention. He stayed close to Luca's hospital bed, never going far. Every time Luca reached out his hand, Shadow was there, resting his head gently in the boy's palm. It was clear they belonged together. Back at Eli's cabin, June sat at the kitchen table, typing fast on her laptop. "The article's going viral," she said. "I sent it to a few contacts, and now national news wants the full story." Eli sipped his coffee. "It's a good story, but there's more coming, and I'm not sure it's all good." "What do you mean?" June asked. Eli looked out the window. If Shadow came from Colorado, someone might be looking for him. And if that someone shows up, they might want him back. June stopped typing. "You think they'd take him away from Luca?" "We'll find out soon enough," Eli said. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot. A tall man in a military-style jacket stepped out, followed by a woman with worried eyes. They walked into the hospital and asked for Sheriff Mel Cross. They were Marla and Dean Winslow, Shadow's original owners. They had just flown in from Colorado after reading June's article. Their voices trembled as they told the sheriff how Shadow had disappeared weeks ago. "We tried everything," Marla said. "Posters, online ads, animal shelters. We even installed cameras around the yard. But he was gone." Dean rubbed his hands together. He kept digging toward the fence, always toward the east, toward here. "You lived next door to the Bell family, right?" the sheriff asked. Marla nodded. "Luca and Shadow were very close, but when we moved, Luca wasn't allowed to say goodbye. He was sick that day." "That must have hurt," the sheriff said. "Shadow never forgot him," Marla whispered. Just then, Ruth and Simon Bell came into the hallway, holding hands tightly. Behind them was Luca in a wheelchair, Shadow at his side. The dog froze when he saw the Winslows. His ears went back. He didn't run to them. He just stood still. "Shadow?" Marla said softly. The dog tilted his head, then looked back at Luca. His tail didn't wag. Dean knelt down. "It's okay, boy. We're here now." But Shadow stepped in front of Luca's chair, blocking them. Ruth stepped forward. He's protecting him. The hallway fell quiet. Sheriff Cross sighed. "We've got a tough situation here. Legally, Shadow belongs to the Winslows, but this is more than law. This is about love." Simon looked at the couple. "We're grateful you came, truly, but Shadow and our son, they saved each other." Marla's eyes filled with tears. "We can see that." Dean looked away. "This is harder than we thought." That night, the two families sat down in a quiet meeting room. Eli and Sheriff Cross were there too, helping everyone talk it through. June sat in the corner, not as a reporter this time, but as a daughter watching people do something hard. "Here's what I suggest," Eli said. "Shadow's formed a bond with Luca that can't be broken, but he also came from you, and I believe he still loves you. So what if we don't make him choose?" Dean raised an eyebrow. "How would that work?" "I own the land behind both your houses," Eli said. "There's a small cabin next door to the Bells. It's available. If you moved back, we could build a connecting gate between the yards. Shadow could go between both homes. No fences, no fights." Marla looked stunned. "You'd let us move back, just like that?" Simon nodded. "If it means Luca doesn't lose his best friend again, yes." Ruth smiled. "He's finally happy again. We want to keep it that way." There was a long pause. Then Marla reached across the table and took Ruth's hand. "Let's do it," she said. "For Shadow, for Luca." Outside the hospital room, June wiped her eyes. That was beautiful." Eli grunted. "People surprise you sometimes." The next day, workers began setting up the gate. Marla and Dean moved into the small cabin down the hill. Luca came home from the hospital, and Shadow ran between the houses like he had never left. People from all over town dropped off dog treats, cards, and blankets. A local woodworker carved a sign and placed it near the stone wall in the woods. It read, "Here stood Shadow, loyal guardian and hero." A small garden was planted beside the memorial. Children came by and left drawings, small toys, and handwritten notes. One read, "Thank you for finding Luca. You're a very good dog." Meanwhile, June's story was picked up by national news. Her phone rang constantly. News channels wanted interviews. A famous dog food company offered to sponsor a Shadow the Hero tour, but June turned them down. "This isn't a story to sell," she told Eli. "This is a story to protect." Eli smiled. "You're finally writing what matters." Later that week, the town held a candlelight ceremony at the park. People gathered with flashlights, candles, and flowers. A choir of school children sang a soft song about bravery. Luca stood next to the stage with Shadow at his feet. He held a small microphone, his hands shaking. "I want to say something," he whispered. The crowd hushed. I was scared, really scared. But Shadow came. He stayed with me. He kept me warm. He barked when he heard people. He never left. Luca looked down at the dog. He came all the way home, for me. The crowd clapped and cheered. Eli and June stood off to the side, their arms folded. "She's not just a reporter anymore," Eli said. June looked confused. "Who?" "You," he said with a grin. "You're telling the stories that save people." June laughed softly. "Maybe, or maybe I just finally came home too." Shadow looked up at Luca and wagged his tail, then turned toward the crowd. He didn't bark, he didn't run. He just stood tall and proud, and everyone knew. This dog, this silent hero, had done something no one else could. He found his way back, and in doing so, he helped everyone else find their way too. Snow began to fall gently over Sycamore Hollow. The rooftops were dusted in white, and strings of twinkling lights hung from the houses. It was almost Christmas, and the small town looked like something from a painting. Inside Eli Granger's cabin, the fire crackled warmly in the stone fireplace. The smell of pine, fresh coffee, and old leather filled the room. Eli stood by the window watching the snow settle over the trees. Behind him, June was finishing up a story on her laptop. "The Foundation loved the article," she said. "They're calling it the Shadow Project." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What kind of project?" "A program to help families find lost pets. They're also funding therapy programs for kids and animals who've gone through trauma." Eli nodded. "That's a good thing." June smiled. It all started with one dog. Across the street, two houses now stood side by side, connected by a wooden gate. On one side lived the Bell family, on the other, the Winslows. And in between, Shadow, the dog who refused to choose one home over the other. Shadow had made his own schedule. Mornings with Luca, afternoons with Marla and Dean, evenings back with Luca again. He crossed through the special gate as if he had always lived this way. Eli had helped install the gate himself. It wasn't fancy, but it was strong and wide, just the way Shadow liked it. Inside the Bell house, Ruth was putting cookies in the oven while Simon set up folding chairs for guests. They were hosting a homecoming holiday party for both families, and the whole neighborhood was invited. "Think he knows this is for him?" June asked, watching Shadow through the window. Eli shrugged. "Shadow's smarter than most folks I've met. I'd say he knows." That afternoon, Luca arrived with Shadow, both wearing red scarves around their necks. The boy looked healthier now, stronger, more confident, and he smiled more, a lot more. Shadow trotted inside, tail wagging, and greeted everyone. He moved from room to room, getting pets and treats from guests, but every few minutes he circled back to Luca, just to check on him. Dean lifted a glass and tapped it lightly with a spoon. "Before we eat, I want to say something." The room grew quiet. We moved away because we thought it was best for our family. Better jobs, better schools. But we forgot that home isn't just a place. It's the people and the pets you share it with. Marla stood beside him. Shadow taught us that. He crossed a continent just to be with the person he loved most. And instead of taking him back, we chose to follow his lead. Simon stepped forward. "You didn't just follow him. You became part of our family." Everyone clapped, and Shadow gave a soft bark, almost like he understood the words. Later, Luca stood in front of the fireplace. A large framed photo of him and Shadow at the hospital sat on the mantel. June had taken it, and Eli had built the frame by hand. Luca held a small piece of paper in his hands. "I wrote something," he said quietly. "It's a letter to Shadow." The room grew still. "Dear Shadow," Luca began. "When I was trapped, I was scared and cold. I didn't know if anyone would find me, but you did. You stayed, you barked, you didn't give up, you saved me." His hands trembled slightly, but he kept reading. "You walked for days, maybe weeks. You followed something inside you that led you back to me. And now that you're here, I'm not scared anymore." He looked up at Shadow, who sat near the tree, tail wagging softly. "I love you, Shadow. Thank you for coming home." People wiped tears from their eyes. Even Eli swallowed hard and looked away for a moment. After the party, guests gathered outside. Snow fell in soft flakes, covering the ground like a white blanket. Shadow and Luca played gently in the yard, tossing a toy back and forth. The gate between the houses stood open, glowing under the Christmas lights. Eli walked outside and stood beside June. "You did good, kid," he said. June chuckled. "You're talking to me or the dog?" Eli smiled. "Both." Across the yard, Ruth and Marla were talking while sipping cocoa. Dean had lifted Luca up so he could hang a new ornament on the shared tree between the yards. Shadow sat below, watching with calm eyes. "I never thought I'd see this," June whispered. "What's that?" Eli asked. "Two families joined together by a dog, a kid healed by hope, a town that came back to life." Eli looked at her. "Sometimes life writes better stories than we do." June smiled. "Sometimes we just need to pay attention." A few days later, the therapy center behind Eli's cabin opened its doors for the winter session. They named it the Hollow Healing Barn. Eli and June had converted the old barn into a cozy space with soft lights, warm blankets, and room for animals and children to recover together. Shadow was the first official helper. He lay beside new kids who were scared of dogs. He showed them patience, trust, and love, just like he had shown Luca. Even Max, the old police dog from town, came by for joint therapy sessions. Shadow treated him like an old friend. At the first session, a girl named Ava sat in the corner, too shy to speak. But when Shadow gently rested his head on her knee, she smiled. "I think he likes me," she whispered. "He does," Luca said proudly. "He knows who needs him." Weeks passed. More families visited, more animals found new homes, and the center grew into something special. On the wall near the entrance, June hung a large photo of Shadow standing tall beside the cracked stone wall in the woods, the place where everything began. Under it, she wrote, "Sometimes the quietest voices are the ones we need to hear." One snowy evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Eli, June, Luca, and Shadow stood outside near the garden. The wind was soft. The trees were quiet. Luca looked up at Eli. "Do you think Shadow knows he's a hero?" Eli smiled and knelt beside him. "I think Shadow doesn't need to be told. He just knows what's right and does it." Shadow licked Luca's hand and sat down, his eyes scanning the woods one last time. He had made his journey, he had found his boy, and now, at last, he was home.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel Love Tales of Tales for long, heartwarming pets and animals, love stories that stay with you long after they end.